Eliza Cooper's hands trembled as the auctioneer grabbed her wrist and yanked her onto the wooden platform. Snow fell thick and silent around the crowd of men below, their breath rising like smoke in the frozen air. She was 19 years old, orphaned, penniless, and now she was being sold to pay her dead father's gambling debts. The numbers started climbing. $50, $100, $200. She closed her eyes and prayed for death. But death didn't come. Instead, a quiet voice from the back called out $400, and everything changed. If you want to know what happens next, subscribe to my channel and follow Eliza's story until the very end. Drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The auctioneer's grip was iron around Eliza's wrist. "Step up, girl. Let 'em see what they're bidding on." She stumbled forward, her worn boots catching on the splintered edge of the platform. The snow had soaked through the thin leather hours ago. Her feet were numb. Her heart was numb. Everything was numb except the shame burning in her chest like a hot coal. 19 years old, the auctioneer bellowed. His voice cracked through the bitter wind. "Strong back, good teeth, can cook clean and mend. Who'll start the bidding at $50? Eliza kept her eyes fixed on the gray sky above the crowd. She wouldn't look at them. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. 50. A thick voice from somewhere to her left. 60. Another voice, younger, eager. 75, and I want her delivered tonight. Laughter followed that one. Cruel, knowing laughter. Eliza's stomach turned. She bit down hard on the inside of her cheek until she tasted blood. Her father had taught her to be strong. He'd taught her to face whatever the frontier threw at her without flinching. But he'd also drunk himself to death and left her with nothing but debts and disgrace. Some lessons were worth more than others. $100. The crowd stirred. $100 was serious money. Eliza's gaze dropped before she could stop herself, and she found a barrel-chested man in a stained coat pushing toward the front. His face was red from whiskey, and his eyes moved over her body like she was livestock at a county fair. "That's Marcus Boone," someone muttered. "Runs the saloon outside of town. Poor girl. She's lucky anyone's bidding at all." Lucky. Eliza almost laughed. Lucky would have been dying in her sleep like her mother. Lucky would have been never being born at all. 100 going once, the auctioneer called. Going twice. 150. The new voice came from the back of the crowd. Quiet, steady, almost reluctant, heads turned. Eliza squinted through the falling snow and found a tall man standing apart from the others. He wore a heavy brown coat dusted with white, and his hat was pulled low enough to shadow his face. But she could see his jaw hard and set, and the way he stood with his weight forward like he was bracing for a fight. Marcus Boone spun around. "Who the hell?" "Jacob Hartwell," someone whispered. "Owns the big spread up north. The widower with them wild kids." Boone's face twisted. 200. 250, Jacob Hartwell said. His voice never rose. The crowd went quiet. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. $250 was more than most men in this territory made in half a year. Boone's neck flushed red above his collar. 300, damn you. 400. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Eliza's knees went weak. $400. For her. She wasn't worth $400. She wasn't worth anything. The auctioneer's eyes gleamed with greed. $400 from Mr. Hartwell going once, Boone sputtered. Now wait just a minute. Going twice. This ain't right. She's just a... sold. The auctioneer slammed his hand against his thigh. To Mr. Jacob Hartwell for $400. The crowd parted as Hartwell moved forward. Up close, Eliza could see the lines carved deep around his eyes, the gray threading through his dark hair at the temples. He was older than she'd first thought. 35, maybe more. His face was weathered from years of sun and wind, and something else. Something that looked like grief worn down to bone. He didn't look at her the way Boone had. He barely looked at her at all. "Can you walk?" he asked. "Yes, sir." "Then follow me. We're losing light." He turned and headed toward a wagon hitched to two sturdy draft horses. Eliza climbed down from the platform on shaking legs. The crowd watched her go, their whispers following her like knives. "Fool's errand, that one. Them kids'll eat her alive. Fourth housekeeper in 2 years. None of 'em lasted more than a few months." Eliza's stomach tightened. She'd heard stories about the Hartwell children. Everyone in the territory had. 3 kids wild as wolves left half feral after their mother died. They'd run off every woman who'd tried to care for them. But $400 said Jacob Hartwell was desperate. And desperate men made deals that reasonable men wouldn't touch. She reached the wagon. Hartwell was already on the bench, the reins loose in his scarred hands. He didn't offer to help her up. She climbed onto the seat beside him and tucked her frozen hands beneath her thin shawl. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for buying me." His jaw tightened. "Don't thank me yet." He clicked his tongue and the horses lurched forward. The town of Bitter Creek disappeared behind them, swallowed by snow and silence. They rode for nearly an hour without speaking. The road climbed into rolling hills dotted with pine and scrub oak. The snow fell steadily, muffling everything, turning the world into a white blur. Eliza's teeth chattered, despite her best efforts to keep them still. "There's a blanket behind the seat," Hartwell said without looking at her. She twisted around and found a rough wool blanket folded beneath some supplies. She pulled it over her shoulders, and the relief was immediate. "Thank you," he grunted. Another mile passed, then 2. Eliza studied him from the corner of her eye. His hands on the reins were steady, sure, the kind of hands that knew hard work and didn't shy away from it. His face gave away nothing. "Mr. Hartwell, you got questions." It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir?" "Then ask 'em. I ain't much for small talk, but I reckon you deserve to know what you're walking into." Eliza straightened her spine. "Why did you pay $400 for me?" For a long moment, he didn't answer. The horses plodded on their breath, steaming in the cold. "I have 3 children," he finally said. 2 boys and a girl. Wyatt's 8. Tommy's 5. Rosie just turned 3. I heard their mother passed 2 years ago, died giving birth to Rosie. His voice was flat, like he was reading from a ledger. "Fever took her before I could get the doctor." "I'm sorry." "Didn't ask for sorry." He shifted the reins. "I've hired 4 housekeepers since then. First one lasted 3 months. Second one 6 weeks. Third one made it 2 months before she packed her bags in the middle of the night. And the fourth?" Rosie bit her. Eliza blinked. Bit her. Drew blood and everything. Woman was on a stage back to St. Louis before the sun came up. Despite everything, Eliza felt her lips twitch. "How old did you say Rosie was?" 3, going on 30 if you ask her brothers. "And the boys, Wyatt and Tommy?" Hartwell's jaw worked. "Wyatt remembers his mother, remembers everything about her. He's angry. Angry at the world, angry at God, angry at me for not saving her. Takes it out on anyone who tries to step into her shoes." "And Tommy?" "Tommy follows his brother. Whatever Wyatt does, Tommy does. They're thick as thieves, those 2. He paused. "But Tommy's different. He's got a soft heart under all that wildness. He just won't let anyone see it." "And Rosie?" "Besides the biting." For the first time, something flickered across Hartwell's face. Something that might have been pain. Rosie never knew her mother. Doesn't remember her voice, or her face, or the way she smelled. All she knows is that every woman who comes into our house leaves again. Eliza's chest tightened. So she pushes them away first. Hartwell looked at her then, really looked. His gray-blue eyes searched her face like he was trying to solve a puzzle. Most folks don't figure that out so quick. I know what it's like to lose a mother young. You learn to protect yourself however you can. Something shifted in his expression. He turned back to the road. I ain't expecting miracles, Miss Cooper. I ain't expecting you to love 'em or fix 'em or turn 'em into angels. I just need someone who won't run at the first sign of trouble. I don't have anywhere to run to, Mr. Hartwell. That's what the last one said. I'm not the last one. He was quiet for a moment. Then, we'll see. The ranch appeared through the snow like a ghost taking solid form. It was bigger than Eliza had expected. A two-story wooden house with a wide porch, several barns, a corral, where dark shapes of horses huddled against the wind. A bunkhouse where lamplight glowed warm through frosted windows. Everything looked well built, but worn like it carried the weight of too much work and not enough hands. Hartwell brought the wagon to a stop near the house. Wait here. He climbed down and disappeared inside. Eliza sat alone on the bench, the blanket pulled tight around her shoulders, and tried to prepare herself for whatever came next. The door banged open. 3 small figures tumbled out onto the porch, their faces sharp with suspicion. The oldest boy, Wyatt, she guessed, had his father's dark hair and his mother's blue eyes, fierce and wounded all at once. He stood with his arms crossed, his chin lifted in defiance. Tommy hung back slightly smaller and thinner than his brother, his blonde hair sticking up in every direction. His eyes were wary, watching Eliza the way a rabbit watches a hawk. And Rosie was a wild thing. Tangled golden curls that looked like they hadn't seen a brush in weeks. A dress that was clearly a cut-down version of a boy's shirt. Bare feet despite the snow, and a scowl that could curdle milk. Hartwell stepped out behind them. Children, this is Miss Cooper. She'll be staying with us. For how long? Wyatt demanded. A month? 2 months? Till she gets tired of us like all the others? Wyatt. She don't look like much. Rosie's voice was high and sharp. She's skinny. She was hungry, Tommy said quietly. It was the first time he'd spoken. Look at her. She ain't eaten in a while. Eliza climbed down from the wagon. Her legs were stiff, her whole body aching from cold and exhaustion, but she made herself stand straight. She walked to the bottom of the porch steps and looked up at the 3 children who held her fate in their small, angry hands. You're right, she said directly to Wyatt. I might not last. I might disappoint you just like the others did. But I'm here now, and I ain't leaving tonight. So maybe we could start there. Wyatt's eyes narrowed. Pa paid $400 for you. Marcus Boone wanted you. Why didn't you go with him? I didn't have a choice in the matter. So you'd rather be with Boone? No. Eliza held his gaze. Your father bought me. Maybe that makes me his property. But I'd rather be property here than anywhere near Marcus Boone. Why? Because your father looked at me like I was a person. Boone didn't. Tommy stepped forward. Did it hurt? Standing up there while they bid on you? Tommy. Hartwell's voice was sharp. It's all right, Eliza said. She looked at the small boy with the soft eyes. Yes, it hurt worse than anything I've ever felt, but I survived it. I reckon I can survive anything after that. Rosie pushed past her brothers and marched down the steps. She stopped right in front of Eliza, so close their toes almost touched, and tilted her head back to glare up at her. Are you going to try to be our mama? The question hung in the frozen air. Eliza could feel Hartwell watching her, could feel all of them waiting for her answer. She crouched down, so she was at Rosie's level. No. Rosie blinked. No. I never knew your mama. I could never replace her, and I won't try. But I can cook your meals and wash your clothes and braid your hair if you want. I can be here when you need someone to be here. That's all I'm offering. Rosie studied her for a long moment. Then she reached out and touched Eliza's cheek with one small cold finger. You're crying. Eliza hadn't realized the tears had escaped. She wiped them away quickly. I told you it hurt. Something shifted in Rosie's expression. The scowl didn't disappear, but it softened around the edges. Pa says crying is for babies. I never said that, Hartwell muttered. Your pa is wrong, Eliza said. Crying is for anyone who has something worth crying about. Rosie considered this. Then she grabbed Eliza's hand and pulled. Come inside. It's cold and I'm hungry, and Tommy burned the cornbread this morning. I did not, Tommy protested. Wyatt was supposed to watch it. I was feeding the horses. You were hiding in the barn because you didn't want to. Enough! Hartwell's voice cut through the bickering. All of you inside. Now! The children scattered through the door, their argument continuing in muffled voices. Eliza started to follow, but Hartwell's hand on her arm stopped her. Miss Cooper. She turned. He was standing close enough that she could see the snowflakes caught in his dark hair, the exhaustion carved into the lines of his face. Thank you, he said quietly, for what you said to them, about not trying to replace their mother. I meant it. I know. That's why I'm thanking you. He released her arm. Your room's upstairs. Second door on the left. Get settled, warm up. Supper's in an hour. He walked past her into the house, leaving her alone on the porch. Eliza stood there for a moment, the snow falling soft around her, and let herself feel the weight of everything that had happened. This morning she'd been a girl with nothing standing on an auction block waiting to be sold to the highest bidder. Now she was here in this frozen place with a grieving man and 3 broken children who didn't want her. She took a deep breath. Then another. Then she went inside. The kitchen was warm from the fire in the big iron stove, and it smelled like coffee and wood smoke and something that might once have been cornbread before Tommy got to it. Eliza found the children already seated at the long wooden table, watching her with varying degrees of hostility. Hartwell was at the stove pouring himself a cup of coffee. You know how to make biscuits? Yes, sir. Good. We ain't had decent biscuits since... He stopped. Swallowed. It's been a while. I can make biscuits, Eliza said, if you show me where the flour is. For the next hour she worked. She found the flour in a barrel near the pantry, the lard in a crock by the window, the buttermilk in the cold cellar beneath the house. Her hands remembered the motions, even when her mind was elsewhere. Cut the fat into the flour. Add the liquid slowly, knead, but not too much, roll and fold again. The children watched her every move. You're doing it wrong, Wyatt said when she started cutting rounds. The other lady used a glass. I don't have a glass. My hands work just as well. The biscuits will be ugly. They'll taste the same. How do you know? Eliza looked at him. Because my mama taught me to make biscuits when I was younger than you. She said pretty biscuits are for people who care more about looks than flavor. You want pretty or you want good? Wyatt's jaw tightened. For a moment she thought he'd argue. Then he looked away. Good, I guess. Then hush and let me work. Tommy giggled. Wyatt shot him a glare that could have peeled paint. When the biscuits came out of the oven, golden and steaming, Rosie was the first to grab one. She bit into it, and her eyes went wide. It's good, she said, her mouth full. Pa, it's good. Hartwell took a biscuit and broke it open. Steam curled up from the soft center. He took a bite, chewed slowly, and something in his face shifted. It's more than good. Can you make 'em every day? Tommy asked. If you want. I want. Even Wyatt took a second biscuit, though he didn't say anything. Eliza counted that as a victory. After supper, Hartwell retreated to his study to work on ledgers, and Eliza found herself alone with the children. They sat in the main room near the fireplace, the logs crackling and popping, the windows dark with night. Will you tell us a story? Tommy asked. He'd inched closer to her throughout the evening, his wariness slowly giving way to curiosity. The other ladies never told stories. What kind of story? A good one. with horses and guns and maybe a dragon. Dragons ain't real, Wyatt said from his corner. They could be. They ain't. Do you want a dragon in the story? Eliza asked Tommy. He nodded eagerly. Then there'll be a dragon. She settled back in her chair. But it won't be the kind of dragon you're thinking of. This dragon lived out on the prairie and it didn't breathe fire, it breathed winter. Rosie crawled up onto the chair beside Eliza, tucking herself against her side like a cat seeking warmth. What does winter breath look like? Like snow, like ice, like the coldest wind you've ever felt. Why was it cold? Because the dragon was lonely, and lonely things turn cold after a while. Tommy moved closer. Even Wyatt looked up from the corner, though he pretended not to be listening. Eliza told them about the winter dragon and the cowboy who found it dying in a canyon. She told them how the cowboy nursed it back to health, even though everyone in town said dragons were dangerous. She told them how the dragon's breath started to warm as it learned to trust, until one day it breathed fire again, but gentle fire, the kind that kept people warm instead of burning them. Did the dragon stay with the cowboy? Rosie asked when the story ended. Her eyes were heavy with sleep. Forever, Eliza said. They built a ranch together, and the dragon kept the herds safe from wolves, and they were never lonely again. That's a good story, Tommy murmured. He was curled up on the rug near her feet, half asleep already. It's made up, Wyatt said, but his voice had lost its sharp edge. All the best stories are made up, Eliza replied. That's what makes them ours. She looked over and found Hartwell standing in the doorway. She didn't know how long he'd been there, but his expression was strange. Soft in a way she hadn't seen before. Soft and sad, and something else she couldn't name. Time for bed, he said quietly. All of you. Getting 3 children to bed was harder than Eliza had expected. Tommy went willingly enough, but Wyatt insisted he was old enough to stay up later, and Rosie flat out refused to sleep in her own room. I sleep with Pa, she announced, her arms crossed, her lower lip jutting out. You sleep in your own bed, Hartwell said firmly. We've talked about this. But I don't want to. Rosie. I'll stay with her, Eliza heard herself say. Just until she falls asleep. Hartwell looked at her. Something passed between them, some silent negotiation. Then he nodded. Fine, just tonight. Rosie's room was small, with a narrow bed, a chest for clothes, and a window that looked out over the dark hills. Eliza sat on the edge of the mattress while Rosie burrowed under the quilts. Will you sing? Rosie asked. I'm not much of a singer. Please. Eliza sighed. Then she began to sing a lullaby her mother had sung to her so long ago it felt like another lifetime. Her voice was rough and unpracticed, but Rosie didn't seem to mind. She closed her eyes, and her breathing slowly evened out. Eliza sat there in the dark, listening to the child sleep, and felt something crack open in her chest. Something she'd been holding tight for a long, long time. She likes you. Eliza turned. Hartwell stood in the doorway, his shoulder against the frame, his face half-shadowed. She's just tired, Eliza whispered. No, she likes you. He was quiet for a moment. They all do, I can tell. It's only been a few hours. Sometimes that's all it takes. He straightened. Get some sleep, Miss Cooper. Tomorrow won't be easier than today. He disappeared down the hall. Eliza eased herself off the bed, careful not to wake Rosie, and made her way to her own room. It was small like the children's rooms, but clean. A narrow bed, a washstand, a window frosted with ice. Someone had left a pitcher of water and a clean towel, and there was a quilt on the bed that smelled like cedar, and something else. Something floral, faded, but still there. Eliza sat on the edge of the mattress and let herself shake. Just for a minute. Just long enough to feel all the fear and exhaustion and strange, tentative hope that had been building inside her since Jacob Hartwell called out $400 and changed her life. Then she pulled herself together, washed her face, and climbed into bed. Tomorrow, she told herself. Tomorrow, she'd figure out how to survive this, how to make herself useful, how to navigate 3 wounded children and their grieving father. But tonight, she was warm. She was safe. She was, for the first time in months, not alone. It was enough. The week that followed was the hardest of Eliza's life. Wyatt tested her at every turn. He hid her shoes in the barn. He put a dead mouse in her flour barrel. He told her flat out that she'd never be part of their family, and she should leave before she got too comfortable. "Why do you hate me so much?" Eliza asked him on the 3rd day after he'd accidentally knocked a bucket of cold water onto her while she was scrubbing the floor. Wyatt's face twisted. "I don't hate you." "Then why?" "Because you're going to leave." The words exploded out of him. They all leave. And the longer you stay, the more Tommy and Rosie will like you. And when you go, they'll cry, and Pa will get that look on his face, and everything will be worse than before. Eliza stood there dripping wet and felt her anger drain away. "Wyatt," she said quietly, "I ain't your mama. I ain't trying to be." "I know that." "Do you?" He looked away. His hands were balled into fists at his sides, 8 years old and carrying so much weight. Eliza walked to him slowly, the way you'd approach a spooked horse. "I can't promise I'll never leave. I can't promise anything about tomorrow. But I can promise you this, I won't leave without saying goodbye. No matter what happens, I won't disappear in the middle of the night like the others did. You'll know." "All right." Wyatt's jaw worked. For a long moment he didn't respond. Then so quietly she almost missed it. "All right." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't trust. But it was something. Tommy was easier. He was soft-hearted beneath his wariness, just like his father had said. By the 4th day, he was following Eliza around the house like a shadow, asking questions about everything. How did she make the bread rise? Why did she fold the laundry that way? What was her favorite color? Had she ever seen the ocean? Never seen the ocean? She told him while they folded sheets together. Never been farther east than Kansas. Pa says the ocean is so big you can't see the other side. I reckon he's right. I want to see it someday. Tommy's face was dreamy. I want to see everything. Maybe you will. Maybe you could come with us. Eliza's hands stilled. Tommy looked up at her with those big gray eyes, so like his father's, and she had to swallow twice before she could speak. Maybe. Tommy smiled a real smile, the first she'd seen from him, and went back to folding. Rosie was something else entirely. She was wild and willful and completely without fear. She climbed furniture like a cat, ate with her hands despite Eliza's best efforts, and had a vocabulary of curse words that would make a sailor blush. "Where did you learn to talk like that?" Eliza demanded after Rosie called one of the ranch hands, a word that made Hartwell choke on his coffee. "The men in the bunkhouse," Rosie said cheerfully. "They teach me all kinds of things." "Well, unlearn them. Those aren't words for little girls." "Why not?" "Because I said so." Rosie considered this. Then, Pa says I ain't a little girl. He says I'm a force of nature. Eliza looked at Hartwell, who was suddenly very interested in his coffee cup. "Did he now?" "Don't look at me," Hartwell muttered. "I just live here." But for all her wildness, Rosie craved touch. She climbed into Eliza's lap at every opportunity. She insisted on having her hair braided each morning, even though she screamed bloody murder when Eliza tried to work out the tangles. She fell asleep curled against Eliza's side during story time, and cried when she was carried to her own bed. "She never did that with the others," Hartwell said one night after Rosie had finally settled. He and Eliza were standing in the hallway outside her door, their voices low. "Did what?" "Let them touch her. She bit the last housekeeper for trying to brush her hair." Eliza thought about the tangles she'd worked out that morning, the tears and the cursing, and the way Rosie had looked at herself in the mirror afterward, wonder in her eyes. She just needed someone patient. She needed someone who wouldn't give up on her. Eliza looked at him. In the dim lamplight, his face was all shadows and angles. I haven't given up on anyone yet. I know. He held her gaze for a long moment. Then he looked away. Good night, Miss Cooper. Good night, Mr. Hartwell. She watched him walk down the hall to his own room, his shoulders heavy with all the weight he carried, and felt something flutter in her chest that she wasn't ready to name. By the end of the first week, Eliza had established a routine. She woke before dawn to start the fire and put on coffee. She made breakfast biscuits and eggs and bacon when they had it, porridge and honey when they didn't. She got the children dressed and fed and reminded them to wash behind their ears. She cleaned and cooked and mended, falling into the rhythm of the house, like she'd always been there. The children still tested her. Wyatt still watched her with wary eyes. Tommy still followed her everywhere. Rosie still screamed when her hair was brushed and cursed like a ranch hand. But something was shifting. On the 7th night after the children were in bed, Eliza found herself on the porch again. The snow had stopped and the sky was brilliant with stars. The cold was sharp but clean, and she breathed it in like medicine. The door opened behind her. Hartwell stepped out, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. He offered one to her without a word. They stood there in silence watching the stars, and Eliza thought about how strange it was that she could feel so at peace in a place she'd been brought to against her will. "They're good children," she said finally. "Under all the anger and fear, they're good." "They are." Hartwell's voice was soft. "Their mother would have been proud." "Tell me about her." He was quiet for a long time. Long enough that Eliza thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Clara was the bravest person I ever knew. Came west from Boston when she was 18, all by herself looking for adventure. I met her at a church social in Bitter Creek. She told me I had the saddest eyes she'd ever seen and asked if I wanted to dance." His voice caught. "We were married 3 months later." "She sounds remarkable." She was. She could do anything: ride, rope, shoot, cook, doctor a sick calf, deliver a baby. Nothing scared her. He paused. Except dying. She was scared of that at the end. Scared of leaving the children, leaving me. Eliza didn't know what to say, so she just stood there, her shoulder almost touching his, and let him have his grief. "I was angry for a long time," he continued. "Angry at God, at the world, at her for dying, at myself for not being able to stop it. I think the children felt it. That's why they pushed everyone away. They were protecting themselves from losing anyone else." "And you?" Eliza asked quietly. "Who's protecting you?" Hartwell turned to look at her. The moonlight caught his eyes, and she saw something there she hadn't seen before. Not just grief, not just exhaustion. Something tentative and warm. Something almost like hope. "I don't know," he said. "Maybe that's what I'm trying to figure out." They stood there in the cold and the dark, in the space between what was and what might be. And for the first time since she'd stepped off that auction platform, Eliza let herself imagine a future that wasn't just survival. It was terrifying. It was wonderful. It was only the beginning. The second week brought a blizzard that trapped them all inside for 3 days straight. Eliza had never seen snow fall so thick, so relentless. It piled against the windows and buried the porch steps and turned the world outside into a white nothing. The ranch hands hunkered down in the bunkhouse, and Hartwell spent hours each day fighting his way to the barn to check on the horses and cattle. But inside the house, there was nowhere to hide. "I'm bored," Rosie announced on the first morning, her voice cutting through the quiet like a knife. "I want to go outside." "You can't go outside," Eliza said, not looking up from the bread dough she was kneading. "The snow's taller than you are." "I don't care. I want to go." "Rosie, I want to go." The tantrum that followed shook the walls. Rosie threw herself on the floor screaming and kicking her face, turning red with fury. Tommy retreated to a corner, his hands over his ears. Even Wyatt looked alarmed. Eliza wiped the flour from her hands and walked over to where Rosie lay thrashing. She didn't pick her up. She didn't try to soothe her. She just sat down on the floor beside her and waited. "What are you doing?" Wyatt demanded. "Waiting." "For what?" "For her to finish." Rosie's screams faltered. She peeked up at Eliza through her tangled hair, clearly thrown by the lack of reaction. "Aren't you gonna yell at me? Would it help?" The other ladies yelled. "I ain't the other ladies." Rosie sat up slowly, her chest still heaving. Snot ran down her upper lip, and her eyes were swollen from crying. She looked like a tiny, furious disaster. "I want my mama," she whispered. The words hit Eliza like a punch to the chest. She heard Tommy's sharp intake of breath, saw Wyatt's face go pale. "I know, sweetheart." Eliza's voice came out rough. "I know you do." "She went away and she didn't come back." "That's right. Everyone goes away." "Not everyone." Rosie's lower lip trembled. "You will. You'll go away too." Eliza reached out slowly, giving Rosie time to pull back if she wanted. When she didn't, Eliza brushed the tangled hair from her face. "I'm here right now. Can that be enough? Just right now?" Rosie stared at her for a long moment. Then she crawled into Eliza's lap and buried her face against her chest, her small body shaking with sobs that were quieter now, deeper. The kind of crying that came from a wound that had never properly healed. Eliza held her and let her cry. Across the room, Tommy had lowered his hands from his ears. His eyes were wet. "Is she gonna be okay?" "She's gonna be just fine," Eliza said. "Sometimes you gotta let the storm blow itself out, that's all." Wyatt stood frozen by the window, his jaw tight, his hands balled into fists. He didn't say anything, but he didn't leave either, and Eliza counted that as progress. When Rosie finally cried herself to sleep, Eliza carried her to the settee near the fire and covered her with a blanket. The girl's face was blotchy and tear-streaked, but peaceful in a way Eliza hadn't seen before. "She's never done that," Tommy said quietly. He'd crept closer, watching his sister with something like wonder. "She never cries like that. She just screams and bites and breaks things. Maybe she needed someone to let her." Tommy was quiet for a moment. Then, "My mama used to hold us like that, when we were sad or scared. She'd just hold us until it stopped hurting." "Your mama sounds like she knew what she was doing." "She did." Tommy's voice cracked. "I miss her." "I know you do, sweetheart." Tommy looked up at Eliza, his gray eyes so much like his father's that it made her chest ache. "Do you miss your mama?" "Every day." "Does it ever stop hurting?" Eliza thought about that, about the way grief changed over time, softening at the edges but never quite disappearing. "It gets different. The sharp parts get smoother. But I don't think it ever stops completely. I think that's how we know we loved them." Tommy nodded slowly, like he was filing this information away somewhere important. Then he reached out and slipped his small hand into hers. "I'm glad you came," he said. "Even if Wyatt isn't. I'm glad." Eliza squeezed his hand and didn't trust herself to speak. The blizzard raged on outside, but inside, something had shifted. Something small but significant. The first crack in the wall these children had built around themselves. It was a start. The storm broke on the third day, and Hartwell emerged from it looking like he'd aged 5 years. His face was gray with exhaustion, his eyes rimmed with red, and he moved like every muscle in his body ached. "Lost 3 head of cattle," he said, slumping into a chair at the kitchen table. "Found 'em frozen near the creek this morning." "I'm sorry," Eliza said, setting a cup of hot coffee in front of him. "Part of ranching. You lose some every winter." He wrapped his hands around the cup like he was trying to absorb its warmth. "The rest made it, though. That's what matters. The children had gathered in the doorway, watching their father with worried eyes. Pa, Tommy's voice was small. Are you okay? Hartwell looked up and his expression softened. I'm fine, son. Just tired. You should eat something, Wyatt said. It was the first time Eliza had heard him speak directly to his father without anger in his voice. Miss Cooper made stew. It's good. Hartwell's eyebrows rose slightly. He glanced at Eliza, who shrugged. Don't look at me. I just cooked it. And biscuits, Rosie added. She was still drowsy from her nap, her hair a wild halo around her face. She makes the best biscuits, Pa, even better than Mama's. The silence that followed was electric. Eliza saw Hartwell's face change, saw the flicker of something painful cross his features. Wyatt went rigid. Tommy's hand found Eliza's again, squeezing tight. Rosie! Wyatt said, his voice sharp. Don't say that. Why not? It's true. No, it isn't. Mama's biscuits were... I don't remember Mama's biscuits. Rosie's chin lifted in that stubborn way Eliza had come to recognize. I don't remember anything about her. All I know is Miss Cooper's biscuits are good. That doesn't mean... Wyatt! Hartwell's voice was quiet but firm. That's enough. Wyatt's mouth snapped shut. His face was flushed, his eyes bright with tears he was clearly fighting not to shed. Hartwell stood and crossed to where his children stood clustered in the doorway. He crouched down, so he was at their level, his big hands gentle on Rosie's shoulders. Your mama made wonderful biscuits, he said softly. And she would be glad, so glad, that Miss Cooper is here to make them for you now. That's not a bad thing, Rosie. It's not replacing her. It's just... different. Understand? Rosie nodded, though she didn't look entirely sure. Hartwell looked at Wyatt. And you. Your mama loved you more than anything in this world. Nothing's ever gonna change that. Not time, not new people, not anything. She's part of you. She always will be. Wyatt's face crumpled. For just a second, he wasn't an angry 8-year-old trying to hold his family together. He was just a boy who missed his mother. Hartwell pulled him into a hug, and after a moment's hesitation, Tommy and Rosie joined in. The four of them stood there, wrapped around each other, and Eliza quietly stepped back to give them space. She busied herself at the stove, stirring the stew, blinking hard against the sting in her eyes. Miss Cooper. She turned. Hartwell was standing behind her, the children scattered to the table, now arguing about who got to sit where. Sir? Thank you. His voice was low, meant only for her. For whatever you did while I was gone. They're different, all of them. I didn't do anything special. You stayed. He held her gaze. That's special enough. Before she could respond, Rosie's voice cut through the moment. Pa Tommy's hogging all the bread. Am not. Are too. Hartwell sighed, but there was a hint of a smile at the corner of his mouth. Duty calls. He turned away, and Eliza watched him go, her heart doing strange things in her chest. The days that followed settled into a new rhythm. Eliza discovered that Wyatt loved horses more than almost anything. She found him in the barn one morning talking softly to a gray mare while he brushed her coat. She's beautiful, Eliza said from the doorway. Wyatt jumped, then scowled when he saw who it was. What are you doing here? Looking for eggs. The hens like to hide them in the strangest places. The brown one usually lays in the back corner, behind the hay bales. Thank you. Eliza didn't move. What's her name? The horse. Wyatt hesitated like he was deciding whether to answer. Storm. Mama named her. She was born during a thunderstorm, and Mama said she had lightning in her eyes. Your mama had a way with words. She had a way with everything. Wyatt's voice was fierce. She was perfect. Eliza walked into the barn, slowly keeping her distance from boy and horse alike. Nobody's perfect, Wyatt. She was. Maybe to you. And that's what matters, isn't it? The people we love are always perfect to us even when they're not. Wyatt's hand stilled on Storm's flank. What was your mama like? The question surprised her. In 2 weeks, Wyatt had barely acknowledged her existence except to test her limits. This was different. This was real. She was kind, Eliza said carefully. Patient. She had this way of making you feel like you were the most important person in the world, even when she was busy with 100 other things. Like, she'd be kneading bread, and I'd come in wanting to tell her something, and she'd just stop, put down whatever she was doing and really listen. Made me feel seen, I guess. Wyatt was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was smaller. Mama used to do that too. She'd put down her mending and pull me into her lap and ask about my day like it was the most interesting thing she'd ever heard. She sounds wonderful. She was. Wyatt's chin trembled, but he didn't cry. Pa tries, but he's always so busy. And the other ladies didn't care about anything except keeping us quiet. I care, Eliza said simply. If you want to talk about your day, about Storm, about anything, I'll listen. Can't promise I'll always know what to say, but I'll listen. Wyatt looked at her for a long moment, his blue eyes searching her face for something. Whatever he found must have satisfied him because he nodded slowly. The brown hen's eggs are best for baking, he said. Just so you know. It wasn't much, but it was something. Progress with Wyatt came slowly, like coaxing a wild animal to eat from your hand. He started leaving his door open when Eliza told stories at night. He stopped hiding her shoes. Once, when she burned her hand on a hot pan, he brought her a cold cloth without being asked. Thank you, Eliza said, surprised. Wyatt shrugged his ears, turning red. Pa says burns need cooling quick. That's all. But he lingered in the doorway after watching to make sure she applied the cloth properly, and Eliza counted that as more progress still. Tommy, meanwhile, had become her shadow. He followed her from room to room, chattering about everything and nothing. He wanted to learn how to bake bread, how to mend socks, how to fold sheets so they stacked proper. He told her about the books his mother used to read to him, about the drawings he made when he was supposed to be doing lessons, about the dream he'd had, where he flew over the mountains on the back of a giant eagle. You're a dreamer, Eliza told him one afternoon while they sorted dried beans for supper. Tommy's face clouded. Pa says dreaming doesn't get the work done. Your pa's not wrong, but that doesn't mean dreaming is bad. Some of the best things in this world came from people who dreamed first and worked second. Like what? Like this ranch. Someone had to dream it before they could build it, didn't they? Tommy considered this. I guess so. So you keep dreaming, Tommy Hartwell. Just make sure you're willing to work for the dreams that matter most. He smiled at her, that bright open smile that came more often now than it had in those first dark days. I will, I promise. Rosie's progress was the most dramatic. The wild, biting, cursing creature from Eliza's first day was still there, lurking beneath the surface. But now there was something else too. A softness, a willingness to be held, to be soothed, to be cared for. She let Eliza brush her hair every morning, though she still complained about the tangles. She stopped cursing mostly, though she occasionally slipped when she thought no one was listening. She started wearing the dress Eliza had mended for her, the one with the blue flowers that had belonged to some other woman's daughter, before it found its way to a mercantile in Bitter Creek. Do I look pretty? Rosie asked one morning, twirling in front of the mirror. You look beautiful, Eliza said, and meant it. Like a princess. Better, like Rosie Hartwell. Rosie beamed. Then quietly, the other ladies never said I was beautiful. Then they weren't paying attention. Rosie threw her arms around Eliza's waist and squeezed tight. I love you, Miss Cooper. The words hit Eliza like a thunderclap. She stood frozen for a moment, her heart pounding, her eyes stinging. I love you too, sweetheart, she managed. Now go wash your face. Breakfast is almost ready. Rosie skipped off, and Eliza leaned against the wall and let herself breathe. She hadn't expected this. Hadn't expected to love these broken, beautiful children with the fierce, terrifying intensity that had crept up on her over the past weeks. Hadn't expected them to love her back. But here she was. And there was no going back now. Hartwell noticed the changes. He didn't say much. He wasn't a man of many words, but Eliza caught him watching her, sometimes a strange expression on his weathered face. Like he was trying to figure out how she'd done what 4 other women couldn't. "They smile now," he said one evening. They were sitting on the porch after the children were in bed, wrapped in blankets against the cold, watching their breath frost in the air. I hadn't realized how long it had been since they really smiled. Not just playing pretend, but really. "They're good kids," Eliza said. "They just needed someone to see past the armor." "You make it sound simple." "It ain't simple, but it ain't complicated either. Kids just want to know they're safe, that someone's gonna stay." She paused. "That's all any of us want, I reckon." Hartwell turned to look at her. The moonlight caught the gray in his hair, the lines around his eyes. "What about you, Miss Cooper? What do you want?" The question caught her off guard. "I don't know that anyone's ever asked me that before. I'm asking now." Eliza thought about it. Really thought. What did she want? A month ago she would have said survival. A roof over her head and food in her belly and safety from men like Marcus Boone. But now, "I want to belong somewhere," she said slowly. "I want a place where I'm not just tolerated, but wanted. Where I matter to someone." She looked down at her hands, rough and red from work. "I know that probably sounds foolish." "It doesn't sound foolish at all." Something in his voice made her look up. He was watching her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "You matter here," he said quietly. "To the children. To this house." A pause. "To me." Eliza's breath caught. "Mr. Hartwell." "Jacob." His voice was rough. "I think you've earned the right to call me Jacob." Jacob. The name felt strange on her tongue. Intimate. Dangerous. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know." He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the wooden porch. "It's getting cold. You should go in." He disappeared inside before she could respond, leaving her alone with the stars and the silence and the wild beating of her heart. She sat there for a long time, turning his words over in her mind. "You matter here. To me." What did that mean? What did he want it to mean? And more importantly, what did she want it to mean? She didn't have answers, not yet. But something had shifted between them, some invisible line had been crossed, and there was no going back to the way things were before. Eliza wrapped the blanket tighter around her shoulders and watched her breath cloud in the cold air. Whatever was coming, she'd face it. That was all she could do. The weather warmed slightly in the 3rd week, enough for Hartwell to take Wyatt into town for supplies. They left at dawn, promising to return before dark. "Keep an eye on things," Hartwell told Eliza as he climbed onto the wagon. His eyes lingered on her face a moment longer than necessary. "We won't be long." "We'll be fine," she assured him. "Go on." She watched the wagon disappear down the road, then turned back to the house where Tommy and Rosie were waiting. "What are we going to do today?" Tommy asked. "Whatever we want," Eliza said. "Within reason." "Can we make cookies?" Rosie's eyes were huge with hope. "I don't see why not." The morning passed in flour and sugar and laughter. Rosie insisted on cracking the eggs herself and got shell in the batter twice, but Eliza just fished it out and kept going. Tommy proved surprisingly good at measuring, his careful nature suited to the precision of baking. "Mama used to make cookies for Christmas," Tommy said quietly, while they waited for the first batch to come out of the oven. "Gingerbread men with raisin eyes." "Maybe we could try those this year," Eliza suggested. "If you remember how she did it." Tommy's face lit up. "Really? Really?" Rosie tugged at Eliza's skirt. "Will you still be here for Christmas?" The question made Eliza's throat tight. "I plan to be." "You promise?" Eliza crouched down to look her in the eyes. I promise I'll do everything I can to be here. Is that enough? Rosie thought about it. I guess. Then quietly, I want you to stay forever. Forever is a long time, sweetheart. I know, but I still want it. Eliza pulled her into a hug and breathed in the smell of flower and little girl and something that felt dangerously like home. Me too, she whispered. Me too. The afternoon brought trouble. Rosie had been coughing since morning. Nothing serious, just a tickle that Eliza had attributed to flour dust from their baking. But as the hours passed, the cough deepened. By mid-afternoon, Rosie's cheeks were flushed and her eyes were glassy. I don't feel good, she whimpered, curling up on the settee. Eliza pressed a hand to her forehead and felt her stomach drop. The skin beneath her palm was burning. Tommy. She kept her voice calm, though her heart was racing. I need you to get me some cool water and some clean cloths. Can you do that? Tommy's face had gone pale. Is she sick? Like Mama was sick? She has a fever. That's all. It's not like... Eliza caught herself. It's going to be fine. I just need those cloths all right. Tommy nodded and ran to do as she asked. Eliza gathered Rosie in her arms and carried her upstairs to her bedroom. The girl was limp against her chest. Her breathing labored her small body, radiating heat. My head hurts, Rosie moaned. Make it stop. I'm going to try, sweetheart. I'm going to try. She got Rosie into bed and stripped off her outer clothes, leaving her in just her shift. When Tommy arrived with the water and cloths, she set to work, sponging down the fever, murmuring soft words of comfort, while her mind raced through everything she knew about illness in children. It's just a fever. Children get fevers all the time. It doesn't mean anything. But Clara Hartwell had died of a fever. The children knew that. Tommy's face, white and terrified in the doorway, told her he was thinking the exact same thing. She's going to be okay, Eliza said firmly. Do you hear me, Tommy? She's going to be fine. You don't know that. I know that I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure of it, and I need you to be brave. Can you do that? Tommy swallowed hard. Then he nodded. Good. I need you to keep watch at the window. The minute you see your pa's wagon, you run down and tell him to come straight up here. Can you do that? Yes, ma'am. He stationed himself at the window, his small face pressed against the glass, while Eliza continued to work. The fever didn't break. By the time the sun started to set, Rosie's temperature had climbed even higher. She was restless, moaning, calling out for people who weren't there. Mama, she whimpered. I want Mama. I'm here, sweetheart. Eliza's voice cracked. I'm right here. Not you. I want my real Mama. The words shouldn't have hurt. Eliza knew that. Rosie was delirious with fever. She didn't know what she was saying, but they hit like a physical blow anyway, stealing her breath. I know, baby. I know you do. Footsteps thundered on the stairs, and then Hartwell was in the doorway, his face ashen. Tommy said... He stopped when he saw Rosie, his expression crumbling. How long? Since this afternoon. The fever keeps climbing. I've been trying to cool her down, but... Hartwell crossed to the bed and dropped to his knees beside it. His big, rough hands were shaking as he touched his daughter's face. Not her, he breathed. Please, not her too. Wyatt appeared behind him, his face a mask of fear. Pa, is she going to die? No. Hartwell's voice was fierce. She's not going to die. Nobody's dying. Do you hear me? But his eyes, when they met Eliza's over Rosie's restless form, were full of terror. I need more water, Eliza said, and we should try to get her to drink something. If the fever doesn't break by morning... What? We might need a doctor. Nearest doctor's in Helena. That's 2 days' ride. Then we pray it breaks tonight. They worked through the night, all of them. Hartwell held Rosie while Eliza sponged her down. Tommy kept the fire going and brought fresh water whenever they needed it. Even Wyatt helped his earlier hostility forgotten in the face of his sister's illness. Somewhere around midnight, Rosie's fever spiked so high that she started convulsing. Hartwell let out a sound like a wounded animal and gathered her tight against his chest. No, 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 not again. Please God, not again. Eliza grabbed his arm. Jacob, look at me. He raised his head and she saw the tears streaming down his weathered face. She's fighting, Eliza said. That's what this is. Her body's fighting. We just have to help her. All right, we have to keep fighting too. I can't lose her. His voice broke. I can't lose another one. I can't. You won't. Eliza gripped his arm tighter. I won't let you. Do you hear me? I won't let you. Something in her voice must have reached him because his breathing steadied. He looked at her, really looked, and what she saw in his eyes stole her breath. Trust. Complete and absolute trust. Tell me what to do, he said. They fought for Rosie together through the darkest hours. Eliza bathed her with cool cloths while Hartwell held her. They dripped water into her mouth drop by drop and sang her lullabies when she cried out in her fevered dreams. Tommy fell asleep in the corner sometime past 2, exhausted beyond what any 5-year-old should have to bear. Wyatt stayed awake, standing guard at the door like a small, fierce sentinel. And then, just as the first gray light of dawn began to creep through the window, Rosie's body went still. Hartwell made a strangled noise. No! Wait. Eliza pressed her hand to Rosie's forehead, felt the heat beneath her palm, felt it receding like a tide going out. Wait, Jacob, feel this. He touched his daughter's face, and his breath caught. The fever. It's breaking. Yes. For a long moment, neither of them moved. They just knelt there beside the bed, their hands touching on Rosie's cooling forehead, watching her breathe. In and out. In and out. Strong and steady. She's going to be okay, Eliza whispered. She's going to be okay. Hartwell's head dropped forward. His shoulders shook. And then he was crying deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from somewhere he'd kept locked away for a very long time. Eliza put her arms around him without thinking. He turned into her embrace, burying his face against her shoulder, and she held him the way she'd held his children, the way she'd wanted someone to hold her all those months ago, when she'd had nothing and no one. It's okay, she murmured, stroking his hair. It's okay. She's okay. You're all okay. I can't do this alone, he choked out. I thought I could, but I can't. I'm not strong enough. You're not alone. You're not. He pulled back to look at her, his face wet with tears, his eyes raw and open in a way she'd never seen before. Don't leave, he said. Please, whatever happens, whatever this is between us, don't leave. I can't. His voice cracked. We need you. I need you. Eliza cupped his face in her hands. His stubble was rough against her palms, his skin warm from hours beside the sickbed. I'm not going anywhere, she said. I'm right here. I'm staying. And she meant it. God help her, she meant it more than she'd ever meant anything in her life. Dawn broke, fully spilling golden light through the window. Rosie stirred, opened her eyes and looked up at them with confused clarity. Pa, Miss Cooper, why's everyone crying? Hartwell laughed a broken, beautiful sound and gathered her into his arms. No reason, sweetheart. No reason at all. Eliza stood and moved to the door where Wyatt was still keeping his silent vigil. His face was pale and drawn, but when he looked at her, something had changed in his eyes. You saved her, he said quietly. We all did. He shook his head. No. You kept Pa together. You kept all of us together. He swallowed hard. I was wrong about you. Wyatt, I thought you'd be like the others. I thought you'd leave." His voice wavered. "But you didn't. You stayed. You fought for her." Eliza crouched down so she was at his level. "Your sister is family. You fight for family. That's just what you do." Wyatt stared at her. And then slowly, deliberately, he stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her neck. It was the first time he'd touched her willingly. The first time he'd let himself be vulnerable with her. "Thank you," he whispered against her shoulder. "Thank you for staying." Eliza held him tight and let her own tears fall at last. Behind them, the sun continued to rise. Rosie's voice, still weak but growing stronger, drifted from the bedroom as she demanded to know why everyone looked so tired. Tommy woke with a start and immediately asked if his sister was okay. Hartwell's low, reassuring rumble answered him. And Eliza knelt in the doorway with Wyatt in her arms and thought, "This is what belonging feels like. This is what home feels like." It was terrifying and wonderful, and more than she'd ever dared to hope for, and she wasn't letting go. Rosie recovered slowly over the next several days. She was weak at first, sleeping more than she was awake, her small body working hard to rebuild what the fever had stolen. But her spirit returned before her strength did, and by the fourth day, she was demanding stories and complaining about staying in bed. "I want to go outside," she whined for what felt like the 100th time. "I'm tired of being sick." "You're almost better," Eliza said, tucking the quilt more firmly around her. "A few more days of rest, and you'll be running circles around your brothers again." "I don't want to wait a few more days." "Nobody ever does. That's why patience is a virtue." Rosie scrunched up her nose. "What's a virtue?" "Something that's hard to do, but worth doing anyway." "That sounds terrible." Eliza laughed despite herself. "Sometimes it is." Tommy appeared in the doorway, his face bright with excitement. "Miss Cooper Pa says we're running low on supplies. He wants to know if you need anything from town." Eliza's hand stilled on the quilt. Town. She hadn't been back to Bitter Creek since the day of the auction, hadn't wanted to face those streets, those people, those memories. But they needed supplies, and she couldn't hide forever. "Tell your pa I'll make a list," she said. Hartwell found her in the kitchen an hour later, the list spread out on the table in front of her. He picked it up and scanned it, his brow furrowing. "This is a lot. You sure you don't want me to go?" "You've got work here. The fences in the north pasture need mending before the next storm, and someone needs to stay with Rosie." Eliza kept her voice steady. "I can handle a trip to town." "I don't doubt that." He set the list down and looked at her. "But Bitter Creek ain't exactly friendly territory for you." "I know." "Marcus Boone." "I know." She met his eyes. "But I can't spend the rest of my life hiding from that man. He doesn't own me. You made sure of that." Something flickered in Hartwell's expression. Pride, maybe. Or worry. Or both. "Take Wyatt with you," he said finally. "He knows the town knows which merchants are fair and which ones'll try to cheat you." "Wyatt? You sure?" "He asked to go. Said he wanted to help." Hartwell's mouth twitched. "I think he's trying to make up for how he treated you those first weeks." Eliza thought about Wyatt's arms around her neck after Rosie's fever broke. The way he'd started leaving the door open when she told stories at night. The way he'd begun setting the table without being asked. "All right," she said. "We'll leave at first light." The ride to Bitter Creek took 3 hours in the wagon. Wyatt sat beside her on the bench, his small body straight with importance, his eyes scanning the road ahead like he was watching for bandits. He'd insisted on bringing his father's old rifle, and it lay across his lap now, unloaded, but present. "You ever shot that thing?" Eliza asked. "Pa's teaching me. I'm pretty good." "That's so. Hit a can at 50 paces last week." His chest puffed out slightly. "Pa said Mama would have been proud." "I'm sure she would be." They rode in silence for a while. The road wound through hills dotted with snow-crusted pines, the sky above them a hard, bright blue. It was beautiful in its harsh way. Eliza was starting to understand why people stayed in this unforgiving country, why they fought so hard to carve out lives in its rocky soil. "Miss Cooper." Wyatt's voice broke through her thoughts. "Yes? Can I ask you something?" "You can ask me anything." He was quiet for a moment, like he was working up courage. "Do you love my pa?" The question hit her like a bucket of cold water. She felt her cheeks flush despite the chill. "That's a mighty personal question." "I know, but I need to know." "Why?" Wyatt's jaw tightened in a way that reminded her painfully of his father. "Because if you're just staying, 'cause you got nowhere else to go, that's one thing. But if you're staying because you actually care about us, about him, that's different." Eliza chose her words carefully. "I care about your whole family, Wyatt. Very much." "That's not what I asked." No, it wasn't. And he deserved an honest answer, even if she wasn't entirely sure what the honest answer was. "I don't know if what I feel is love," she said slowly. "I'm not sure I know what love is supposed to feel like. But I know that when I think about leaving this ranch, leaving you and Tommy and Rosie and your pa—" She stopped, her throat tightening. "It feels like someone's reaching into my chest and squeezing." Wyatt considered this. "That sounds like love to me." "You think so?" "That's how I felt when Mama died. Like someone was squeezing my heart all the time." His voice wavered slightly. "It doesn't squeeze as much anymore. But sometimes when I think about her, it still does." Eliza reached over and put her hand on his shoulder. "Your mama raised a smart boy, you know that." Wyatt ducked his head, but she caught the hint of a smile. "Pa helped." "I reckon he did." They reached Bitter Creek just before noon. The town looked different in daylight, less menacing than it had in Eliza's memories. Just a dusty collection of wooden buildings clustered along a single main street with horses tied to hitching posts and people going about their business. But the memories were still there. The platform where she'd stood, the faces in the crowd, the feeling of being weighed and measured like livestock. Eliza's hands tightened on the reins. "You okay?" Wyatt asked. "I'm fine." She forced her fingers to relax. "Let's get what we need and get home." They started at the general store, where a thin woman with suspicious eyes took Eliza's list and began pulling items from the shelves. Wyatt stayed close, his hand resting on the stock of the unloaded rifle, like it could protect them from more than just bandits. "You're the Hartwell housekeeper," the woman said. It wasn't a question. "That's right. Heard about you. Heard Jacob paid $400. Her eyes traveled over Eliza's worn dress, her work-roughened hands. "Can't imagine why." Eliza felt her spine stiffen. "I can't imagine it's any of your business." The woman's eyebrows rose. "Got a mouth on you?" "When I need one." For a moment, the air between them crackled with tension. Then the woman laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Fair enough. Most girls in your situation wouldn't have the spine to talk back." She set a sack of flour on the counter. "You need anything else?" "Just what's on the list." They finished at the general store and moved on to the feed supplier, then the dry goods merchant, then the apothecary for medicine to keep on hand in case Rosie's fever returned. Wyatt proved himself invaluable, knowing which merchants offered fair prices and which ones needed haggling. "The butcher'll try to charge you double for bacon," he warned as they approached the last stop. "Pa says you gotta stand firm or he'll rob you blind." "I'll keep that in mind." They were loading the last of the supplies into the wagon when a voice behind them made Eliza's blood freeze. "Well, well, if it ain't Jacob Hartwell's little purchase." She turned slowly. Marcus Boone stood in the middle of the street, his stained coat open despite the cold, his face red from drink even at midday. Two other men flanked him, rough-looking characters with hard eyes and hands that rested too casually near their gun belts. "Mr. Boone?" Eliza kept her voice steady. We're just finishing our business. We'll be on our way. Now hold on, hold on. Boone stepped closer, his eyes traveling over her in a way that made her skin crawl. Ain't you gonna say hello proper? After all, we almost got real well acquainted, you and me. I don't think we have anything to say to each other. See, that's where you're wrong. He moved closer, still close enough that she could smell the whiskey on his breath. I've been thinking about you, girl. Thinking about how Jacob Hartwell swooped in and stole what was rightfully mine. I wasn't yours. You were gonna be. I had the high bid till he opened his fat mouth. Boone's face twisted. $400 for a piece of nothing like you. Made me look like a fool in front of the whole town. That ain't her fault, Wyatt said. His voice was high but steady, and he'd stepped forward to stand beside Eliza, the rifle clutched in his white-knuckled hands. Boone looked down at him with contempt. This one of Hartwell's brats. My name is Wyatt Hartwell, and you better leave Miss Cooper alone. Or what? Boone laughed. You gonna shoot me with your daddy's gun, boy? If I have to. The laughter died. Boone's eyes went cold. You threatening me, boy? He's 8 years old, Eliza said, stepping in front of Wyatt. Leave him be. Your quarrel's with me, not him. My quarrel's with anyone connected to Jacob Hartwell. Boone grabbed her arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. Now I think you and me need to have a private conversation about how things are going to be from now on. Let go of me. I don't think I will. I said let go. She tried to pull away, but his grip was iron. Panic clawed at her throat. The other men were closing in, cutting off any escape. Wyatt was shouting something, but the blood rushing in her ears made it impossible to hear. And then another voice cut through the chaos. Low. Deadly. Cold as the wind off the mountains. Get your hands off her. Now. Boone's head snapped around. Jacob Hartwell stood at the end of the street, his horse breathing hard beneath him, his hand resting on the pistol at his hip. His face was carved from stone, and his eyes, those gray-blue eyes that Eliza had seen soft with grief and warm with gratitude, were flat and murderous. Hartwell. Boone's grip loosened slightly. This ain't your concern. She's under my protection. That makes it my concern. Jacob swung down from his horse and walked toward them with the easy, dangerous grace of a man who'd faced down worse than Marcus Boone. I'm going to give you one chance to walk away. Just one. You don't scare me. I should. Jacob stopped less than an arm's length away. He was taller than Boone, broader, and there was something in his stillness that spoke of violence held barely in check. I've killed men for less than what you're doing right now. Boone's face went pale. His hand fell away from Eliza's arm. This ain't over, Hartwell. Yes, it is. You come near her again, near any of my family, and I'll put you in the ground. That's not a threat, it's a promise. For a long, terrible moment, nobody moved. Then Boone spat in the dirt at Jacob's feet and turned away, his men following like dogs at his heels. Jacob watched them go, his hand still on his pistol, his body coiled tight. He didn't relax until they disappeared around a corner. Then he turned to Eliza, and all the ice in his expression melted. Are you hurt? No, I'm fine. But her voice was shaking, and her arm throbbed where Boone had grabbed her. How did you know? Wyatt's rifle. He fired a shot into the air. Jacob's jaw tightened. Good thinking, son. Eliza looked at Wyatt. The boy was pale and trembling, but his chin was high. He was hurting her paw. I couldn't just stand there. No. Jacob put a hand on his son's shoulder. You couldn't. You did right. Wyatt's face crumpled, and he threw himself against his father's chest. Jacob held him tight, one hand cradling the back of his head. It's all right, he murmured. It's all right. You were brave. You protected her. Eliza stood apart, her arms wrapped around herself, trying to stop the trembling that had taken over her body. She'd known Boone was dangerous. She'd known coming back here was a risk. But knowing something and experiencing it were two different things. Hey, Jacob's voice was soft. He'd released Wyatt and was standing in front of her now, close enough to touch. "Hey, look at me." She raised her eyes to his. "You're safe," he said. "He's gone. He won't touch you again." "You can't promise that." "I can, and I am." His hands came up to cup her face, gentle, as they'd been with Rosie during the fever. "I won't let anyone hurt you. Do you understand? Not Boone. Not anyone. You're mine to protect now." The words should have felt possessive, should have reminded her of the auction of being bought and sold like property. But they didn't. They felt like shelter, like safety, like coming home. "Jacob," she whispered. "I know." His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "I know. We should talk about this. About whatever this is between us. But not here. Not now." "When?" "Soon." He dropped his hands and stepped back, and she felt the loss of his warmth like a physical ache. "Let's get you home." The ride back to the ranch was quiet. Jacob had tied his horse to the back of the wagon and taken the reins himself. Wyatt sat between them, still shaken, but growing calmer with every mile they put between themselves and Bitter Creek. Eliza stared at the road ahead and tried to sort through the tangle of emotions knotted in her chest. Fear, relief, gratitude, and something else, something deeper and more dangerous that she still wasn't ready to name. "Pa!" Wyatt's voice broke the silence. "Yeah. Did you mean it? What you said to Mr. Boone about killing men?" Jacob was quiet for a long moment. "I've done things in my life I'm not proud of, son. Before I met your mama, I was a different man. Harder, angrier. I hurt people who probably didn't deserve it. But you changed. Your mama changed me. Loving her, being loved by her, it made me want to be better." He glanced at Eliza, then back at the road. "Some things are worth changing for." Wyatt nodded slowly, like he was filing this information away with everything else he was learning about the world. Then he leaned against Eliza's shoulder and closed his eyes. "I'm glad Pa found you," he murmured. "I'm glad you came to our family." Eliza put her arm around him and held him close. "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." They arrived home just as the sun was beginning to set. Tommy came running out to meet them, his face alight with excitement. "You're back. Did you bring candy? Pa said you might bring candy? We might have picked up a few peppermint sticks," Eliza said, climbing down from the wagon. "Yes." Tommy grabbed Wyatt's arm. "Come on, let's go see if Rosie's awake. She'll want candy too." The two boys disappeared into the house, leaving Eliza and Jacob alone in the fading light. "I should unload the supplies," Eliza said. "It can wait." Jacob stepped closer. "We need to talk. Now. Now." He took her hand and led her toward the barn, away from the house, away from the children's ears. Inside, the horses shifted in their stalls, their warm breath clouding in the cold air. Jacob stopped near the back, where the shadows were deepest, and turned to face her. "What happened in town?" he started. "It wasn't your fault. I should have been there, should have gone with you. You couldn't have known. I should have assumed." His hands were fists at his sides. "Boone's been nursing a grudge since the auction. I knew that. I should have—" "Jacob." Eliza stepped forward and took his clenched hands in hers. "Stop. It's over. I'm safe. We're all safe." He looked down at their joined hands, then up at her face. "When Wyatt's shot rang out, when I realized what was happening." His voice cracked. "I've never ridden so fast in my life. I kept thinking, what if I'm too late? What if he hurts her before I can get there?" "But you weren't too late. This time." His grip tightened on her fingers. "But what about next time? What about the time after that? I can't always be there, Eliza. I can't—" "Shh." She raised one hand to his face, felt the rough stubble against her palm. "Listen to me. I spent most of my life being afraid. Afraid of my father's debts. Afraid of what would happen when he died. Afraid of that auction platform and the men who wanted to buy me. But I'm not afraid anymore. You know why? Why? Because I have something worth fighting for now. I have those children in that house, and I have you, and I have a home that I never expected to have. That's worth more than fear. That's worth everything. Jacob stared at her. The last of the sunset light was filtering through the cracks in the barn walls, painting everything in shades of gold and shadow. "Eliza," he said, and her name in his mouth was like a prayer. "I know what you're going to say." Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. "I know this is complicated. I know I came here in a way that wasn't exactly, 'I love you.'" The word stopped her cold. "I love you," he said again, stronger now, surer. "I've been fighting it for weeks, telling myself it wasn't proper, that you deserved someone who didn't come with so much baggage. But watching Boone put his hands on you, watching you stand there protecting my son when you had every right to run..." He shook his head. "I can't fight it anymore. I don't want to." "Jacob." "You don't have to say it back. I know this is fast. I know it's not how these things are supposed to go, but I needed you to know. Whatever happens, whatever you decide, I love you. I think I have since the day you knelt down in the snow and told Rosie you wouldn't try to replace her mama." Eliza felt the tears spilling down her cheeks, warm against her cold skin. "You impossible man. Is that a yes or a no?" "It's..." She laughed, a wet, broken sound. "It's me trying to tell you that I love you too, you fool. I love you, and I love your children, and I love this ridiculous, beautiful life we're building together." Jacob's face transformed. The worry, the fear, the careful control, all of it melted away, leaving something raw and radiant underneath. "Say it again," he whispered. "I love you." He kissed her. It wasn't gentle, not like the brief touches they'd shared before. This was desperate and hungry, and full of everything they'd both been holding back. His hands were in her hair, her arms were around his neck, and for a long, breathless moment, nothing existed except the two of them. When they finally broke apart, they were both trembling. "Well," Eliza said shakily. "That was..." "Yeah." Jacob rested his forehead against hers. "Yeah, it was." They stood there in the darkening barn, breathing each other's air, neither one willing to break the spell. "The children will be wondering where we are," Eliza finally said. "Let them wonder a minute longer." "Jacob." I know. But he didn't move. "I just want to remember this. The way you look right now, in this light with that smile on your face. I want to remember it forever." "You're being sentimental." "I'm being honest. There's a difference." Eliza kissed him again, softly this time. "Come on. Tommy will eat all the peppermint sticks if we don't stop him." They walked back to the house hand in hand, the stars beginning to emerge above them. As they reached the porch, the door flew open, and all three children tumbled out. "What took you so long?" Tommy demanded. "Wyatt said you were having a grown-up conversation." "What's that mean?" "It means they were kissing," Rosie announced. She was wrapped in a blanket, her face still pale but her eyes bright. "I saw from the window." "Rosie?" Eliza felt her face flush. "You're supposed to be in bed." "I got bored." Rosie peered up at her father. "Does this mean Miss Cooper's gonna be our mama now?" The question hung in the cold air. Eliza looked at Jacob. Jacob looked at Eliza. "What do you think?" he asked her quietly. "Want to make this official?" Eliza looked at the children. Wyatt with his guarded hope. Tommy with his open joy. Rosie with her fierce, defiant love. She looked at this man who'd bought her to save her, and ended up giving her everything she'd never known she wanted. "Yes," she said. "I think I do." The children erupted into cheers. Tommy grabbed Rosie and swung her around while Wyatt stood back, trying to look mature but failing to hide his grin. "Does this mean you'll make gingerbread cookies for Christmas?" Tommy asked breathlessly. "It means I'll be here for every Christmas," Eliza said. "If you'll have me." "We'll have you," Wyatt said. His voice was steady, certain. "We'll have you forever." Jacob pulled Eliza close and kissed her temple. "You heard the boy. Forever it is." Eliza leaned into his embrace and watched the children celebrate in the starlight. Behind them, the house glowed warm and welcoming. Ahead of them, the future stretched out like the Montana sky, vast and uncertain and full of possibility. She'd come here with nothing. She'd been bought like property and brought to this frozen place against her will. And somehow, impossibly, she'd found everything. A family, a home, a love she'd never dared to dream of. It was more than enough. It was everything. The news of the engagement spread through Bitter Creek like wildfire. Eliza hadn't expected it to be a secret, not with 3 children who couldn't stop talking about it. But she also hadn't expected the flood of visitors that descended on the ranch in the days that followed. Neighbors she'd never met arrived with covered dishes and curious eyes. The ranch hands offered gruff congratulations. Even the thin-lipped woman from the general store sent a bolt of fabric with a note that read, "For the dress. Every bride deserves something new." "I don't know what to do with all this." Eliza confessed to Jacob one evening after yet another wagon had departed down the snowy road. "I thought people would disapprove." "Some do." Jacob pulled her close, his arm warm around her shoulders. "But most folks out here understand that life's too short and too hard to waste time judging how people find happiness. And the ones who don't understand, they can keep their opinions to themselves." But not everyone did. The letter arrived a week after the engagement, tucked into a delivery of supplies from town. Eliza found it at the bottom of a crate, her name scrawled across the front in handwriting she didn't recognize. She opened it with trembling fingers. "I know what you are," it read. "A bought woman playing at respectability. Jacob Hartwell might have forgotten where you came from, but I haven't. This isn't over. M.B." Eliza's blood went cold. "What's that?" Tommy's voice made her jump. He was standing in the kitchen doorway, his head tilted with curiosity. "Nothing, sweetheart." She crumpled the letter and shoved it in her pocket. "Just some old correspondence." "You look scared." "I'm not scared." But her voice wavered, and Tommy, perceptive, gentle Tommy, didn't look convinced. "Should I get Pa?" "No. No, I'm fine. Really." She forced a smile. "Help me sort these supplies." Tommy nodded, but his eyes stayed worried as he worked beside her. That night, after the children were in bed, Eliza showed Jacob the letter. His face went hard as he read it. "Boone," I assumed. "That coward." He crumpled the paper in his fist. "Sending threats through the mail because he's too yellow to face me directly." "Jacob, maybe we should wait. For the wedding, I mean. If Boone is planning something—" "No." His voice was flat final. "We're not waiting. We're not hiding. We're not giving that man 1 inch of power over our lives." "But the children—" "The children are why we can't let fear win." He took her hands in his. "Eliza, listen to me. Men like Boone feed on weakness. If we postpone the wedding, if we show him that his threats work, he'll never stop. The only way to beat a bully is to stand your ground. What if he tries something? What if he hurts someone? Then I'll deal with it. That's my job. That's what husbands do. You're not my husband yet. I will be. In 2 weeks if the preacher's available." His grip tightened on her fingers. "Trust me." Eliza looked into his eyes, those gray-blue eyes that had seen so much pain and still managed to hold hope, and felt her fear recede. "I trust you," she said. "I trust you with everything." The next morning, Jacob rode into town and came back with news. "Preacher says he can do it Saturday after next," he announced at supper. "That gives us 12 days to get ready." 12 days? Wyatt's eyes went wide. "That's not very long." "Long enough. We ain't doing anything fancy. Just family, a few neighbors, and the good Lord's blessing." "But Miss Cooper needs a dress," Rosie said. She'd recovered fully from her fever and was back to her usual fierce self. A pretty dress, with flowers. I have a dress, Eliza started. Not a wedding dress, a real one. Rosie crossed her arms. Mama had a real wedding dress. I've seen the picture. The table went quiet. Jacob's jaw tightened, and Eliza saw the flash of pain in his eyes. Rosie, Wyatt said softly. Maybe don't. It's all right. Eliza reached across the table and took Rosie's small hand. Your mama's dress was beautiful, wasn't it? Rosie nodded, her defiance wavering. Pa keeps the picture in his room. She looked like a princess. I'm sure she did. Eliza glanced at Jacob, who was staring at his plate. And you're right. Every bride deserves a beautiful dress. Maybe we can make one together. Would you like that? Rosie's face lit up. Really, I can help. You can all help. We'll make it a family project. Tommy bounced in his seat. Can I help too? Absolutely. Someone needs to hold the pins. I'm not sewing anything, Wyatt muttered, but there was no real resistance in his voice. You can supervise, Eliza said. Make sure we're doing it right. That night, after the dishes were cleared and the children were occupied, Jacob found Eliza on the porch. Thank you, he said quietly, for how you handled that. With Rosie. She's just processing. She's trying to figure out where I fit in relation to her mama. I know, but you made it easy for her, easier than it could have been. He leaned against the railing beside her. Clara would have liked you. The words made Eliza's throat tight. You think so? I know so. She always said she could read people in 5 minutes flat. One look at you, and she would have known exactly who you are. And who am I? Jacob turned to face her. The moonlight caught the silver in his hair, the lines around his eyes. You're the woman who's going to save this family. Who already has, maybe. You're strong and stubborn and kind, and you don't give up on people even when they give you every reason to. Sounds like you've been thinking about this. I've been thinking about you since the day I saw you on that platform. His voice dropped. Standing there with your chin up, refusing to break, even though I could see how scared you were. I thought that's someone worth fighting for. Is that why you bid? Because I looked brave? That's part of it. The other part? He shook his head. I don't know. Instinct, maybe? Something told me you belonged here. With us. Eliza leaned into him, her head resting against his shoulder. I'm glad you listened to your instinct. Me too. They stood there in the cold, watching their breath cloud in the night air, and for a moment, everything was peaceful. No threats, no fear. Just the two of them, and the stars, and the promise of a future neither of them had dared to imagine. The peace didn't last. 3 days before the wedding, one of the ranch hands rode in at a gallop, his face white. Boss, someone cut the fence in the north pasture. Cattle are scattering everywhere. Jacob was on his horse before the man finished speaking. How many? 50 head, maybe more. They're heading toward the creek. Damn it. Jacob looked at Eliza, who'd come running at the commotion. I have to go. This could take all day. Go. We'll be fine. But as she watched him ride away, a cold finger of dread traced down her spine. The fence hadn't cut itself, and today of all days, with Jacob gone for hours, the ranch vulnerable. Miss Cooper. Wyatt had appeared beside her, his young face serious. Something's wrong, isn't it? Maybe, maybe not. She put a hand on his shoulder. Get your brother and sister inside. Stay together. Don't open the door for anyone except me or your father. Is it that man Boone? I don't know, but I'm not taking chances. Wyatt's jaw set in that stubborn way, so like his father's. I'll get the rifle. No. Stay inside. Keep your siblings safe. That's your job right now. But, Wyatt. She gripped his shoulders and looked him in the eye. Your father trusted me to protect this family while he's gone. I need you to trust me too. Can you do that? The boy swallowed hard, then nodded. Yes, ma'am. Good. Now go. She watched him run toward the house, then turned to scan the horizon. Nothing moved except the wind through the pines, but the feeling of wrongness wouldn't leave her. She went to the barn and found the old shotgun Jacob kept there for predators. It was heavy in her hands, and she'd never fired one in her life, but the weight of it was reassuring. Then she went back to the house and waited. The waiting was the worst part. An hour passed. 2. The children grew restless, sensing the tension even though Eliza tried to hide it. Tommy wanted to go outside. Rosie wanted a story. Wyatt stood by the window watching the road with fierce concentration. He'll be back soon, Eliza said, though she wasn't sure who she was reassuring. What if he's not? Tommy's voice was small. What if something happened? Your father's the toughest man I know. Nothing's going to happen to him. Promise? Eliza hesitated. She didn't want to make promises she couldn't keep. But Tommy's eyes were so wide, so scared, and she remembered what it felt like to be a child afraid of losing someone. I promise, she said. The sound of hoofbeats made them all freeze. Pa! Tommy ran toward the door. Wait! Eliza grabbed him before he could reach it. We don't know. The door burst open. Marcus Boone stood in the entrance, a pistol in his hand, and a twisted smile on his face. Well now, isn't this cozy? Eliza shoved Tommy behind her. Get out of this house. I don't think I will. Boone stepped inside his eyes, sweeping over the children huddled together. Hartwell's not here, is he? Off chasing his precious cattle. Shame about that fence. Must have been some bad luck. You did this. Prove it. His smile widened. You know I've been thinking about you ever since that day in town. The way you looked at me, like I was dirt under your shoe. Me who was going to save you from that auction block. Me who would have given you a good life. A good life? Eliza laughed, and it sounded wild even to her own ears. You would have used me and thrown me away. Maybe, maybe not. Guess we'll never know. He raised the pistol. Here's how this is going to go. You're coming with me. The brats, too. Hartwell wants to play hero. Let's see how heroic he feels when his whole family disappears. I'm not going anywhere with you. You don't have a choice. His eyes flickered to the shotgun in her hands. What are you going to do, shoot me? You don't have the nerve. You don't know what I have. Boone took another step closer. Behind Eliza, she could feel the children trembling. Rosie was crying silently, her small body pressed against Eliza's legs. Tommy was gripping the back of her dress so hard she could feel his fingernails through the fabric. And Wyatt. Wyatt wasn't behind her anymore. That's far enough. The boy's voice rang out from the corner of the room. He stood by the fireplace, his father's rifle trained on Boone, with hands that shook but didn't waver. Boone laughed. You again? What did I tell you about playing with guns, boy? I ain't playing. Wyatt, Eliza said carefully. Put the gun down. No, ma'am, I won't. Boone's smile faltered. You shoot me, kid, you'll hang. They hang murderers in this territory, even little ones. I'll take that chance. Wyatt's voice cracked, but his aim stayed true. You're not hurting my family. I won't let you. Wyatt! He hurt Mama. The words exploded out of the boy. I heard the ranch hands talking. Years ago, before I was born. He came to our ranch and Pa... His whole body was shaking now. Pa had to make him leave, and now he's back. He's been watching us. I saw him, Miss Cooper. I saw him in the trees last week, and I didn't say anything because I thought I was imagining things, but I wasn't, and now he's here, and I won't let him. Wyatt! Eliza's voice was firm. Look at me. The boy's eyes flickered to her, wild with fear and fury. You're brave, the bravest boy I know, but I need you to trust me right now. Can you do that? But, can you trust me? Something in her voice must have reached him. Slowly, inch by inch, the rifle lowered. Boone's smile returned. Smart kid. Now, as I was saying. The shotgun blast caught him in the shoulder. Boone screamed and staggered backward, his pistol flying from his hand. Blood bloomed across his coat. He crashed into the doorframe and slid to the ground, his face a mask of shock and pain. Eliza stood over him, the smoking shotgun still raised, her arms aching from the recoil. Her ears were ringing. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her teeth. "You shot me," Boone gasped. "You actually shot me. I warned you." Her voice didn't sound like her own. "I told you to get out. You crazy, Miss Cooper." She turned. The children were staring at her, all three of them, with expressions she couldn't read. Horror, awe, fear. "Are you all okay?" she asked. Wyatt was the first to nod. Then Tommy. Then Rosie, who launched herself at Eliza's legs and clung there sobbing. "It's okay," Eliza murmured, one hand dropping to stroke the girl's tangled hair. "It's okay. You're safe. You're all safe." Hoofbeats thundered outside. The door flew fully open, and Jacob burst through, his pistol drawn, his face wild. He took in the scene, Boone bleeding on the floor, Eliza standing over him, with the shotgun, the children clustered around her, and for a moment, he just stood there frozen. "Eliza." Her name came out broken. "What? He came for us." She was surprised by how steady her voice was. "I stopped him." Jacob crossed to her in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. The shotgun clattered to the floor. The children piled around them, a tangle of arms and tears and relief. "I thought when I saw the smoke from the gun..." Jacob's voice was muffled against her hair. "I thought I'd lost you. I thought I was too late." "You weren't. We're okay." She pulled back to look at his face. Wyatt was so brave. He held a rifle on Boone. He protected his brother and sister. Jacob looked at his son. Something passed between them. Something deep and proud and wordless. "You did good, boy," Jacob said quietly. "You did real good." Wyatt's face crumpled. He threw himself at his father and held on tight. Behind them, Boone groaned. "I need a doctor. You can't just..." "Shut up." Jacob released Wyatt and walked to where Boone lay. His voice was cold as the winter wind. "You come onto my land, threaten my children, try to take the woman I love." He crouched down, his face inches from Boone's. "Give me one reason I shouldn't finish what she started." "Jacob." Eliza's hand on his shoulder. "Don't. He's not worth it. He deserves a lot of things. But if you kill him, you'll have to answer for it. And these children need their father." She gripped his shoulder harder. "They need you. I need you. Don't give him the power to take that away." For a long, terrible moment, Jacob didn't move. The muscles in his jaw worked. His hands clenched and unclenched. Then slowly he stood. "Get the rope from the barn," he told Wyatt. "We're tying him up and taking him to the sheriff. Let the law deal with him." "The law ain't gonna do nothing," Boone spat. "I got friends, money. I think you're done." Jacob's voice was flat. "Everyone in this territory knows what you are now, what you tried to do. Your friends. Your money won't matter. You're finished, Boone. It just took a 19-year-old girl to prove it." Eliza felt a strange surge of pride at his words. She wasn't just the woman who'd been bought on an auction block. She wasn't just a victim of circumstance. She was someone who'd stood up, fought back, and won. Maybe that had been true all along. Maybe she just needed someone to believe it. The sheriff arrived an hour later, summoned by a ranch hand Jacob had sent riding the moment the situation was contained. Boone was hauled away, still bleeding, still cursing, promising revenge that everyone knew would never come. "You'll hear from my lawyer," he screamed as they loaded him into the wagon. "This ain't over, Hartwell." "Yes, it is," Jacob said, and he turned his back and walked toward his family. That night, after the children were finally asleep and the house was quiet, Eliza and Jacob sat together by the fire. "You saved them," he said. "You saved all of us. I did what needed doing. Most people wouldn't have. Most people would have frozen or panicked. Or, I'm not most people." Jacob laughed a real laugh, the first she'd heard from him since that morning. No, you're definitely not." He pulled her closer and she rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "The wedding's in 3 days," he said. "I know. You still want to go through with it after everything that's happened?" Eliza tilted her head to look at him. "Are you having second thoughts?" "Never." He kissed her forehead. "I just wanted to make sure you weren't." "Jacob Hartwell, I shot a man for you today. If that doesn't convince you I'm committed, I don't know what will." He laughed again, and the sound was warm and wonderful and full of promise. "I love you," he said. "I love you too. 3 more days. 3 more days." She closed her eyes and let herself drift safe in his arms while the fire crackled and the wind howled outside. 3 more days until she became his wife. 3 more days until this strange, beautiful journey reached its destination. She could hardly wait. The morning of the wedding dawned cold and clear. Eliza woke before the sun, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and terror that she couldn't quite separate. Today. After everything, the auction, the children, the fever Boone's attack today, she would become Jacob Hartwell's wife. She lay in her narrow bed and stared at the ceiling, trying to wrap her mind around the magnitude of it. A soft knock on her door made her sit up. "Come in." Rosie's face appeared in the crack. "You're awake." "I am." "Can I come in?" "Of course, sweetheart." The little girl padded across the room and climbed onto the bed, burrowing under the covers like a small, warm animal. "I couldn't sleep." "Neither could I." "Are you scared?" Eliza considered the question. "A little. Are you—" Rosie nodded against her shoulder. "What if everything changes? What if you get married and then you're different and you don't love us anymore?" "Oh, honey." Eliza pulled her closer. "Getting married doesn't change how much I love you. If anything, it makes it more real, more permanent. Promise. I promise. Cross my heart." Rosie was quiet for a moment. Then, "I dreamed about Mama last night." Eliza's breath caught. "Did you—" She was standing in a field of flowers. She looked happy. And she said— Rosie's voice wavered. She said it was okay, that she wanted Pa to be happy again, that she was glad I had someone to braid my hair. Eliza felt tears prick at her eyes. "That sounds like a good dream." It was. Rosie tilted her head back to look at her. "I think Mama sent you to us. I think she knew we needed you." "Maybe she did." "I'm glad you're staying." Rosie's arms tightened around Eliza's waist. "I'm glad you're going to be my mama now." The word hit Eliza like a thunderbolt. Mama. Not Miss Cooper. Not Eliza. Mama. "Is that—" She had to stop, clear her throat. "Is that what you want to call me?" Rosie nodded. "If that's okay. Tommy wants to too. He told me last night, and Wyatt said he'd think about it." "That's more than okay." Eliza pulled her into a tight hug, not caring about the tears streaming down her face. "That's everything." They lay there together as the sun rose, two souls who'd found each other against all odds, holding on tight. The house came alive as the morning progressed. The ranch hands had decorated the porch with pine boughs and red ribbons. Neighbors began arriving with covered dishes and warm congratulations. The preacher from Bitter Creek came early, his Bible tucked under his arm and a genuine smile on his weathered face. "Jacob Hartwell getting married again," he said, shaking his head in wonder. "Never thought I'd see the day." "Neither did I, Reverend," Jacob admitted. He was dressed in his best clothes, a dark suit that had clearly been packed away for years, his hair combed back and his boots polished to a shine. But here we are. Here we are indeed. The preacher's eyes crinkled. And the bride, how's she holding up? Haven't seen her yet. The children are guarding her room like little soldiers. As if on cue, Tommy came tearing down the stairs. Papa, Miss Cooper? I mean Mama? She looks like an angel. Jacob's breath caught. Mama? Rosie asked if we could call her that, and she said yes, and now she's crying, and Rosie's crying. And even Wyatt looks like he might cry, and, breathe, son. Jacob crouched down to Tommy's level. Slow down. Tommy took a gulp of air. She's almost ready. Rosie said to tell you to wait by the fireplace. That's where you're getting married, right? By the fireplace. That's right. Okay, I'll tell them. He started to run back up the stairs, then stopped. Pa, yeah. I'm really happy, like really, really happy. Is that okay? Jacob's throat tightened. That's more than okay, son. That's exactly how you should feel. Tommy beamed and disappeared up the stairs. Jacob stood there for a moment, his hand on the banister, his heart full to bursting. He thought about Clara, about the life they'd built together, about the children she'd given him. He thought about the dark years after her death, the grief that had nearly swallowed him whole. And he thought about Eliza. Standing on that auction platform, with her chin held high, fighting for his children, fighting for him, teaching them all how to hope again. You ready? The preacher's voice was gentle. Jacob straightened his shoulders. Yeah, I'm ready. He walked to the fireplace and waited. The room fell quiet. The children came first. Rosie walked slowly down the stairs, scattering dried flower petals from a basket. Her face solemn with the importance of her task. She wore a dress that Eliza had mended for her, the one with the blue flowers, and someone had managed to tame her wild curls into something approaching order. Tommy followed, his back straight, carrying a small pillow with two simple gold bands resting on top. He looked terrified and proud in equal measure. And then Wyatt appeared at the top of the stairs, his arm linked through Eliza's. Jacob forgot how to breathe. She wore the dress they'd made together, all of them, even Wyatt, who'd grudgingly helped with the buttons. It was cream-colored fabric, simple but elegant, with lace at the collar and cuffs. Her dark hair was pinned up with some of the dried flowers Rosie had been scattering, and her eyes, those warm brown eyes that had first caught his attention on the auction platform, were shining with tears and joy, and something that looked like wonder. She was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Pa, Wyatt's voice was thick. I'm giving her to you now, but you have to promise to take care of her, like she took care of us. I promise. And you have to promise to make her happy, because she deserves to be happy. I know she does. Wyatt nodded, satisfied. He placed Eliza's hand in Jacob's, then stepped back to stand with his siblings. The preacher opened his Bible. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today. Eliza barely heard the words. She was too focused on Jacob's face, on the way he looked at her, like she was something precious, something worth fighting for. His hands around hers were rough and warm, and she could feel them trembling slightly. Jacob Hartwell, the preacher was saying, do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until death do you part? I do. Jacob's voice was steady, sure. I absolutely do. And do you, Eliza Cooper, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until death do you part? Eliza looked at the man standing before her, the widower who'd bought her on an auction block to save her from something worse, the father who'd worked himself to the bone trying to hold his broken family together, the man who'd ridden like the wind to protect her, who'd held her through the dark nights, who'd given her something she'd never thought she'd have again. A home, a family, a future. I do, she whispered. With all my heart, I do. Then by the power vested in me by God and the territory of Montana, I now pronounce you husband and wife. The preacher smiled. You may kiss your bride. Jacob cupped her face in his calloused hands and kissed her softly, tenderly, like she was something he'd been waiting his whole life to find. The room erupted in cheers, the children loudest of all, and Eliza felt tears streaming down her face even as she laughed. I love you, Mrs. Hartwell, Jacob murmured against her lips. I love you too, Mr. Hartwell. Finally, Rosie's voice cut through the celebration. Can we eat cake now? The celebration lasted well into the evening. The neighbors had outdone themselves, bringing food enough to feed an army. There was roast venison and baked ham and more pies than Eliza could count. Someone had brought a fiddle, and soon the furniture was pushed back, and people were dancing in the cleared space. Jacob twirled Eliza around the room until she was dizzy and breathless with laughter. Tommy insisted on a dance of his own, standing on her feet while she walked him through the steps. Even Wyatt allowed himself to be pulled into a reel, his face flushed with embarrassment, but his eyes bright. Rosie fell asleep curled up on a pile of coats in the corner, exhausted from excitement, her flower basket clutched to her chest like a stuffed animal. She's something else, one of the neighbor women said, following Eliza's gaze. All three of them are, and the change in them these past weeks, well, it's nothing short of miraculous. They changed me just as much, Eliza said. That's how family works, dear. We change each other. As the night wore on and the guests began to depart, Eliza found herself standing on the porch, watching the last wagon disappear down the moonlit road. The air was cold against her flushed cheeks, but she barely felt it. Arms wrapped around her from behind. Jacob's chin came to rest on her shoulder. What are you thinking about? He asked. Everything. Nothing. She leaned back into his warmth. This time last year I was watching my father drink himself to death and wondering what would become of me. Now I'm standing on the porch of my own home with my husband's arms around me. It doesn't seem real. It's real. He pressed a kiss to her temple. I promise you it's real. I know. She turned in his arms to face him. I just need to remind myself sometimes that this isn't a dream, that I'm not going to wake up back on that auction platform. Jacob's expression sobered. That auction platform is the best thing that ever happened to me. I know that sounds wrong, but it's true. If you hadn't been standing there that day, if I hadn't been stupid enough or brave enough to bid, you weren't stupid. You were kind. I was desperate. There's a difference. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. But somewhere between desperation and kindness, I found you. And that's the only thing that matters. Pa. Tommy's sleepy voice drifted from the doorway. Rosie woke up and she's crying for you. And for Mama. Eliza's heart swelled at the word. She didn't think she'd ever get tired of hearing it. We're coming, she said. Tell her we'll be right there. She took Jacob's hand, and together they walked inside to comfort their daughter. The weeks after the wedding settled into a new rhythm. Winter deepened, bringing more snow, more cold, more long nights huddled around the fire. But inside the Hartwell home, there was warmth that had nothing to do with the flames in the hearth. Eliza officially moved her things into Jacob's room, their room now, though she kept her old room as a sewing space, a place she could retreat to when she needed quiet. The children had adjusted to the new arrangement with remarkable ease, perhaps because so little had actually changed. Eliza was still the one who made their breakfast braided. Rosie's hair helped Tommy with his letters and talked horses with Wyatt. The only difference was that now she had a ring on her finger and a husband who looked at her like she'd hung the moon. You're smiling, Jacob said one morning, catching her at the window. Am I? You've been smiling a lot lately. I have a lot to smile about. He came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. Anything in particular? Just this. All of this. She gestured at the view outside the window. The snow-covered fields, the horses in the corral, the smoke rising from the bunkhouse where the ranch hands were starting their day. 6 months ago, I had nothing. Now I have everything. Not everything. His voice was strange, and she turned to look at him. What do you mean? I mean... He hesitated. Clara and we always wanted more children. But after Rosie, after what happened, I thought... He broke off. I never imagined I'd have the chance again. Eliza's heart began to beat faster. Jacob, I'm not pressuring you. I know we haven't been married long and everything's still new and... Jacob. She put a finger to his lips. Are you trying to ask me if I want children with you? His ears went red. I'm doing a terrible job of it, aren't I? A little? But she was smiling. The answer is yes, by the way. I would love to have children with you. When the time is right. The relief on his face was almost comical. Yeah. He kissed her then long and deep and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless. The children are going to be thrilled, Eliza said. Tommy's been asking when he's going to be a big brother. Has he? Every day for the past week. She laughed. He says he wants a little brother so he won't be the youngest boy anymore. And if it's a girl, then Rosie will finally have someone to boss around besides her brothers. Jacob laughed, a warm, rich sound that still surprised her every time she heard it. He'd laughed so rarely when she'd first arrived. Now it seemed he couldn't stop. We should tell them, he said. Not that anything's certain yet, but hope is good for the soul. Exactly. They found the children in the kitchen where Wyatt was supervising Tommy's attempts to make pancakes while Rosie critiqued from her seat at the table. They're lumpy, she announced. They're supposed to be lumpy, Tommy protested. Mama's pancakes aren't lumpy. Mama's had more practice. Children, Jacob's voice cut through the bickering. Your mother and I have something to tell you. 3 heads swiveled toward them. Eliza felt her cheeks flush at the word mother, still not quite used to hearing it in Jacob's voice. We're not making any promises, she said carefully. But your father and I have been talking and, well, we're hoping that someday, maybe soon, there might be a new addition to this family. It took a moment for the words to sink in. Then Tommy's face lit up like the sun coming out from behind clouds. A baby. You're gonna have a baby. We're going to try. I'm gonna be a big brother. Tommy jumped up and down. I'm gonna be a big brother. I'm gonna be a big sister. Rosie scrambled off her chair and threw herself at Eliza's legs. Can it be a girl? I want a sister. We can't really choose, sweetheart. But can you try? Please. Eliza looked at Wyatt, who hadn't moved from his spot by the stove. His face was unreadable. Wyatt, she said gently. What do you think? He was quiet for a long moment. Then, I think Mama would be happy. Our first Mama, I mean. She always said this house was meant to be full of children. She was right. Jacob crossed to his eldest son and put a hand on his shoulder. And she'd be proud of the young man you're becoming. I know I am. Wyatt's composure cracked. He threw his arms around his father's waist and held on tight. I'm glad Miss Cooper, Mama came to us, he said, his voice muffled against Jacob's chest. I'm glad you bought her. Jacob looked over his son's head at Eliza, his eyes bright with unshed tears. So am I, son. So am I. Spring came slowly to Montana. The snow melted in fits and starts, revealing patches of brown earth that gradually turned green. The creek swelled with snowmelt, and the cattle grew fat on new grass. Birds returned to the trees, filling the air with song, and Eliza's belly began to swell. Are you sure? Jacob asked for the 10th time, his hand pressed against her abdomen. I'm sure. I felt it move yesterday. Right here. She guided his hand to the spot. Wait for it. There. Jacob's face transformed. The wonder in his eyes made Eliza's heart ache with love. That's our baby, he whispered. That's our baby. I can't believe after everything. I know. She covered his hand with hers. I know. The children had taken the confirmation of the pregnancy with their usual enthusiasm. Tommy had appointed himself the baby's official protector, following Eliza around the house to make sure she didn't lift anything too heavy. Rosie had started making a list of names, all of which were increasingly impractical. Wyatt had become even more responsible, taking on extra chores without being asked, as if preparing for his role as the eldest of 4. 5. Rosie corrected when Eliza mentioned this. You're forgetting yourself, Mama. I'm not one of the children, sweetheart. Yes, you are. You're Pa's biggest child. She said it with such matter-of-fact certainty that Eliza couldn't help but laugh. She's got you there, Jacob said, grinning. Don't encourage her. But she was smiling too, and the warmth in her chest had nothing to do with the spring sunshine pouring through the windows. On a warm evening in late May, Eliza stood on the porch and watched the sun set over the mountains. Almost a year had passed since the auction. Almost a year since she'd stood on that platform, terrified and alone, waiting to be sold to the highest bidder. It seemed like a lifetime ago. It seemed like yesterday. Penny, for your thoughts. She turned. Jacob had come up behind her, as he often did in these quiet moments. His arm slipped around her, careful of her growing belly, and she leaned back into his warmth. I was thinking about how much has changed, she said, and how much hasn't. What hasn't changed? You, the children, this place. She gestured at the rolling hills, the grazing cattle, the house that had become her home. Everything that matters is exactly the same. It's just more now. Fuller. Better. Better because of you. Better because of all of us. She turned in his arms to face him. I used to think my story was a tragedy. Orphaned, sold, stripped of everything. But I was wrong. My story isn't about what I lost. It's about what I found. And what did you find? You, the children. A family that chose me before I could choose them. Her voice caught. A home where I belong. Jacob kissed her forehead, her cheeks the tip of her nose. You're ours, Eliza Hartwell. You've been ours since the moment I saw you standing on that platform refusing to break, and you'll be ours for the rest of our lives. Promise? Promise. The door banged open behind them. Mama Patami says I can't name the baby butterfly princess, but I think... Rosie, that's a terrible name. It is not. It's beautiful. Children don't want to be named after bugs. Butterflies aren't bugs, they're butterflies. Eliza looked at Jacob. Jacob looked at Eliza. And despite the chaos, despite the noise, despite everything, they both smiled. Shall we? Jacob asked. We shall. Hand in hand, they walked inside to referee the latest battle in the endless war of sibling rivalry. The door closed behind them, shutting out the cooling evening air, sealing in the warmth and light and love that filled every corner of the Hartwell home. Outside, the stars began to appear one by one, scattered across the Montana sky like promises waiting to be kept. The cattle lowed in the distance. The wind whispered through the pines. And somewhere in the house, a little girl's laughter rang out bright and clear and full of joy. Eliza Cooper had come to this place with nothing, no money, no family, no hope. She'd been bought like property and brought to a frozen ranch full of angry children and a grieving widower who didn't know how to love anymore. But she'd stayed. She'd fought. She'd loved fiercely and been loved fiercely in return. And now, standing at the kitchen of her own home, surrounded by the family she'd helped to heal, carrying new life beneath her heart, she understood what her mother had told her all those years ago. Home isn't a place. It's the people who refuse to let you go. The Hartwells had refused to let her go. And she would spend the rest of her life being grateful for it. This was her family. This was her home. This was her forever. And it was more than enough, it was everything.